Out of the politics of this crisis and how President Obama is responding to it. Pat Buchanan and Lawrence O'Donnell are both MSNBC political analysts. Of course, the reference I made earlier, which is here's the president, by the way, in the aftermath, immediate aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Here he is.
Again, I want to thank you all for, and Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job. The FEMA director's working 24 hours. They're working 24 hours a day.
Well, of course, that made the President of the United States look like a bozo, and we don't want to see that again. And that is apparently a misperception as to what kind of a job Brownie was, in fact, doing. Michael Brown was not doing a great job. He had gone from running the Arabian Horse Association to defending America against natural disaster, and it wasn't a smooth sail on his part. Pat Buchanan, the President of the United States, how's he doing right now?
Well, I think he's doing very well. He's doing a lot better than that fellow at WHO or at the UN who's really causing a panic with this kind of talk. The president
saying that this thing can't be stopped?
No, the president said we have no crisis right now, Chris, and there's no need to panic right now, and there's no need for alarm. There is a very serious problem in Mexico with 150 dead and 1,000 or 2,000 hospitalized. In America, you've got 40 or 50 people have caught the flu. One person went to the hospital. Everybody else seems to be getting well, including those kids at St. Francis Prep. So the idea we should panic, Chris, in 1918, your hometown of Philadelphia, 15,000 people died from the flu, and some numbers 600,000 in the United States of America. So
well, you think the border's going to protect us? I mean, it's 150 people dead in Mexico. What's
the border's not going to protect us. You got 1,000 or 2,000 people a day walking into the United States, Chris, as I've been talking about for years, and they head straight for Southern California. So no, the border's not going to protect us.
So they're typhoid Marys, as far as you're concerned.
Sure, but a lot of diseases have been brought in. Tuberculosis has been brought in. This Chagas disease, which is terrible. Bed bugs have been brought back. You know, polio has even come back and things like that. Measles. Well,
let's take a look at the Obama administration. The governors around the country have done their swine flu full-court press today. Here they are going at it right now.
I'm getting regular updates on the situation from the responsible agencies.
We're coordinating very closely with the Centers for Disease Control, with the Department of Homeland Security. We are taking this very seriously.
We are monitoring this outbreak minute by minute.
We do not yet know how widespread this flu will be within the United States. So we continue to move aggressively.
On their toes, Lawrence, what do you think?
Yeah, it's really quite a contrast from the response to Katrina, including just the basic ability of a president to articulate a situation. I don't think there's a better clip to show of President Bush after Katrina being, more articulate and explaining the situation any better than saying that some people were working 24/7. The Obama administration's response has been quick. It's been sharp. An emergency press briefing yesterday on a Sunday at the White House with Homeland Security Chief and with the White House press secretary. The president's language today was less than what you're hearing from some of the World Health Organization people. But if you've been following this since Friday, as I have very carefully, I have friends in Mexico. I've been kind of worried about it. And you'll see that the language that everyone is using escalates, Chris, almost hour by hour. And so, the World Health Organization on Saturday was in a much milder verbal place than it is on Monday, and I think it's going to be in another place by Wednesday. That's the way this has been moving.
I just wonder, with all this traffic that goes on, as you point out, not just illegal traffic, which you focused on, obviously, but all the travel that goes on among these countries. I mean,
globalization carries with it a downside, no question about it. But I do think Obama's rhetoric...
Did you put those words in my mouth? I'm basically saying there's a lot of traffic in the world right now. People moving around on jet planes, and you turn it into a negative.
No, I said globalization, the fact that people travel all over the world and things like that, you're exactly right, and they do travel. You notice the European Union told folks not to visit the United States or watch out visiting the United States and Mexico. Yeah. Obama's rhetoric, I think, is dead right. He is right out front of this. Chris, the idea of a president is get in front of the story, on top of the story, get out, and you're leading the solution. I think more than that clip you showed, Bush's problem is he's sitting down in Crawford, completely out of touch. Nobody's calling him and telling him, cut on the TV, take a look at what's happening at the convention center,
get the
82nd Airborne in.
Government?
No, government failed, Chris, at every level.
Why is there a pattern here? Why is it the people who believe in the government and its potential to help us and meet challenges?
Chris,
there's a psychological and ideological difference
Chris,
between Bush
it is reality. The government of New Orleans, the government of Louisiana, and the government of the United States all failed in Katrina.
Let me, you ever thought about the ideological difference between Bush and Obama?
Oh,
Lawrence?
Definitely, Chris. Look, the government of New Orleans was a pathetic government that didn't have the ability to respond to this. Similarly, the government of Louisiana. But the federal government has been set up to respond to hurricanes for a long time. FEMA is a very professional organization. And the problem you pointed out, Chris, is that that hurricane, all of that was on television. All you had to do was turn on your TV. And there was no one working for President Bush who was of the right mindset, who knew what this situation in New Orleans really meant just by watching television, and call him up and say, look, we need very sharp government intervention there. That is inconceivable from a Democratic administration, which has a much more activist view about what
Pat, do you like this
do.
regular digging up of Bush and beating him up? Do you like this?
Well, I think, look, governments have failed. Look at Jerry Brown did with the Mediterranean fruit fly, the complete disaster. That's very close to this. But there's no doubt Bush was asleep at the switch, and you had the third shift down there at Crawford. Everybody's on vacation, and nobody calls up and says, cut on MSNBC.
In the midst of this, on the edge of this perhaps pandemic, which I hope we can avoid, and I hope your optimism is well-founded here, and the WHO guy looks a little bit like Chicken Little, I hope. I want to give you some good news. Did you hear this story today that an expert watching these interrogations at Gitmo and elsewhere discovered and is now testifying on the record to the effect, under oath, that they were, among the efforts they were efforting down there was to try to get these suspected terrorists to admit some kind of relationship between Iraq and 9/11 so you could justify this war. What do you make of that? In other words, trying to get them to lie.
Or if they were trying to get somebody to lie, that would be appalling. If they use this techniques to say, look, we know you guys got this illegal stuff. You got all this garbage over there. Now tell us where it is so we can get it and destroy it. That would be different.
But doesn't it offend you that ideologically we were using torture as a means to establish an ideological case to go to war with Iraq?
I mean, if you're ideological, you're talking about the suggestion you're saying is they wanted to fabricate a lie and wanted these guys to tell it.
Push the case for war whatever way they could.
If they did that, and I don't know that they did that, I'd be surprised. If they did that, they ought to be brought up and the whole thing
Lawrence,
opened up and investigated.
It seems to fit the case. What do you think?
Absolutely, and everyone knows, including the people who are in favor of torture, that the big risk of torture is it's going to produce what you want to hear. Now, when you're using the word Iraq in your question, as you're torturing the person, tell us how Iraq was involved in 9/11. You're obviously trying to push for an answer, and you're probably going to get some ridiculous disinformation about Iraq being involved in 9/11.
And how many times did the former Vice President Dick Cheney and his aide-de-camp, his henchman, Scooter Libby, go over to the CIA with one purpose, to make the case we have to go to war with Iraq? It fits like a glove. Anyway, thank you, Pat Buchanan. Thank you, Lawrence O'Donnell.